On May 16, 2014, 9-year-old Felicia Williams would leave her house to go get food with her trusted godmother and her godmother's new boyfriend. Instead of going to the McDonald's that they had planned to eat at, the man would drive the girls to his apartment, where a series of events would take place that led to the young girl's death. Felicia, who was affectionately known to her family as Sugar Plum, was living with her mother and 3 sisters in Tampa, Florida. 23-year-old Ebony Wiley had befriended the family after moving next door to them, as she worked at a nursing home as a housekeeper nearby. Over a period of around 8 months, Ebony would grow very close to the young girl Felicia and the family as a whole, and they would all affectionately refer to her as the girl's godmother.
Did you and Felicia Williams become close?
Yes.
Can you describe the kind of relationship that you and Felicia Williams had?
It's like a mother and daughter. I fed her. If she needed anything, I gave it to her. It was a very close relationship of like a mother and a daughter relationship.
Did you think of yourself as like a pseudo godmother to her?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you see each other daily or a couple times a week?
Daily. She'll make sure she comes see me.
Ebony had recently met a new man and let him into her life after he had struck up a conversation with her on the street. May 13, 3 days before the death of young Felicia, Ebony and one of Felicia's sisters, Jeremisha, were walking to the store close to their house.
Did you meet this person who first identified themselves as Trevor? Where did you initially meet that person?
I was walking down the street with a girl. Was on the way to going to the store, and he seen me. We caught eye contact. I walked on the back road, and he pulled up behind us and put up, and he tried to talk to me.
And when you said that he had pulled up behind you, can you describe how that happened?
He pulled up, and he was like, "What's up?" And I was like, "Hey," and he was trying to talk to me. He said, "Oh, I thought you was a young girl." I was like, "No." And
let me stop you for a minute. Was he, you said he was driving?
Yes.
What kind of vehicle was he in?
It was a silver Lexus vehicle.
A silver Lexus?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you speak first to him, or did he speak to you first?
He spoke to me first.
And what was the first thing that he said to you?
He said, "Hey." I was like, "Hey." He was like, I was trying to make sure that you wasn't no little girl. I was like, "No."
I'm sorry. He said, I was trying to make
sure that you was no young girl. And I was like, "No." And that's when he proceeded to talk to me, and he got my number. I got his.
Was he insinuating that you were a young girl?
Because I looked at him, he was like, "Oh, no, I just don't want the police to come up behind me and say you young." I was like, "No, I'm old enough." And he proceeded to communicate with me and talk, and that's when he gave me his number, and we ended up talking on the phone.
Granville Williams, who had at the time actually given his name to Ebony as Trevor, has a disturbing criminal history. A Jamaican-born American who had charges laid against him in 2013, the year prior, for assault against his estranged wife. He was arrested for raping and strangling her at gunpoint. The state was forced to drop the case, though, when the victim redacted her statement and said she didn't remember the attack happening. On top of this, after he was in custody for the murder of Felicia Williams, 4 more charges were placed against him for sexual misconduct with a child. The 12-year-old girl had come forward to speak to police about her interactions with him post his arrest. After Ebony had exchanged her phone number with this man, they would begin to talk on the phone immediately and organized a hangout for that night.
Was this the first time that you had been to his apartment?
Yes, ma'am.
Was there any discussion before on the phone that that's where you all would hang out that night for the date?
No.
So when you went to the apartment, you said that you were drinking Hennessy?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know how many drinks you had?
Probably like 2.
Did the defendant drink any Hennessy?
Yes.
Do you know how many drinks he had?
Probably like 2 too.
And you said that you took some drugs?
Yes.
Who gave you those drugs?
He did.
And who is he, the defendant?
Yes.
And what drugs did he give you?
He gave me Molly.
Did you and the defendant engage in sex at all that night?
Yes, we did.
And where is it that you had sex with the defendant?
In the room.
In what room?
He presented the room that was his mom's.
He had told you it was his mother's room?
Yes,
What was in that room?
it was a bed.
Did you spend the night or stay for a few hours and then go home?
I can't recall that I spent the night, but I believe I spent the night. I can't remember.
Do you recall how you got home?
Yes, he took me home.
Do you recall if you had to work that next day?
I believe I did have to work. I'm not sure, but yes, I believe I had to work because it was on a weekday. Yes.
So you would have had to be at work at 7 a.m.?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have feelings for the defendant when you?
Yes, I did.
When did you start developing feelings for him?
That night. That night, we had a nice conversation about life and relationships, and I thought we was going to take it further, but no.
When you say that you had a nice conversation about relationships and life, can you go into a little bit more detail about what you talked about?
He sold me a dream. That's what I believe. He sold me a dream.
He sold you a dream?
Yeah. He was like, "Oh, I make a lot of plenty of money. I'm going to take you, work with me, and stuff like that." And he sold me a dream. That's what I believe.
What did he tell you that he did for a living?
Work on phone towers.
Did you think that you were falling in love with him?
Yeah, I did.
You did fall in love with him?
Yeah.
35-year-old Granville would tell Ebony that he was single and gave no hint that he was involved with any other women. Over the next 2 days, they would stay in communication almost constantly, and this is reflected by extensive phone records. Ebony was falling for this man and even saved his contact in her phone as my husband, as he promised to marry her one day. During one of these many conversations that they had, Granville would learn about Ebony's goddaughter, Felicia.
In any of those conversations, did you bring up Felicia Williams?
It was that day I brung up Sugar Plum. I believe that Thursday or that Wednesday, my manager came to me. Someone came to me and said that it was a young girl coming up to the job looking for you and stuff like that. And I think that was the second time she had told me about Sugar Plum coming up to the job. And really, I was going to decide to call HRS and going towards her mother's house because I'm like, I know there's school hours, and I'm like wondering why she's showing up at the job around school hours. And then I called him and vented to him.
When you say you called him and vented to him, is that the defendant?
Right.
And did you vent to him about your concern about Felicia coming up to your job?
Correct.
And what was his response when you...
Because I brung it up. I was like, I'm going to call HRS on her mother. And he was like, who you talking about? I'm like, my godchild, she's showing up at my job during school hours. And I'm like, how in the world this child is out the door around this time of day and then if she's not at school? And he was like, no, don't do that. That might be your gift. You need to care for the child. Maybe you need to take her to McDonald's. We need to take her to McDonald's and sit down and talk to her. And I thought about it, I was like, you know what, you're right. Okay, we could do that.
Ebony would organize with Granville that he was going to pick her up that day after she finished work. They would then drive to Felecia Williams' house and collect the child, then take her to a nearby McDonald's to discuss with her recent rebellious behavior. Granville, who worked as a repairman on cellular towers but was frequently unemployed, did not own the vehicle that he drove around in. At the time of this incident, he had no home but would often stay with his girlfriend, Calissa Kelly, the owner of the silver Lexus. On the day of May 16, which was the day that Ebony and he had planned this intervention of sorts for young Felicia, Granville and his girlfriend Calissa were at a moneylender facility. Calissa was there with her silver Lexus as she was going to use the title of this vehicle as collateral to apply for a loan.
At some point, did the defendant enter the residence and approach you?
Yes.
And what did he say to you?
I believe he asked me maybe how much longer I was going to be at that time. Not really sure.
Okay. Did he say something about having to leave or you needed to leave?
Eventually, he did say he needed to leave.
Okay.
He will be back.
In fact, did he leave the Insta loan after that first time and then come back in a second time?
I don't think he left the premises. I think maybe he went back outside. But he didn't leave in the vehicle. He just went
Right.
back outside.
That's what I meant. He left inside the business and walked back towards the vehicle.
Correct.
And then he came back in the business a later time?
A few minutes afterwards,
Okay.
yes.
And you have seen today, I think a couple of weeks ago when you came into my office, you've seen a video from that lobby that
Correct.
reflects you being there and shows the defendant coming in and out.
Yes.
The second time he came in and approached you, did he tell you he needed to leave?
I think that's when he told me that he would be back. He had to go do something. Yeah.
Okay. And you were indicating to him that he didn't know the area,
Correct.
St. Petersburg.
Correct.
So you were trying to figure out what would you have to do in this area.
Correct.
And so he was telling you he needed to leave.
Correct.
Now, at some point, he walks out after telling you that. Is that right?
Correct.
And do you, at some point, get up and go out and follow him out?
When he told me, I didn't have a chance to speak because I was in the middle of doing something with the young lady. But when I finished signing it, that's when I got up to try to catch him, to ask him, like, where were you going? You don't even know anybody around here. So that's how that conversation went.
Okay. And were you trying to get him not to leave?
I was trying to get him to tell me where he was going, and I also was trying to get him to wait on me because it wasn't going to be that much longer.
And did he do that?
No.
Did he leave?
Yes.
And how did that make you feel?
I wasn't happy.
Would it be fair to say you were upset?
Yes, a little.
Okay. And later, did you get more upset?
Yes.
Because when he left, he told you he'd be right back, right?
Yes.
Okay. But he didn't come right back, did he?
No.
Calissa is left at the lone place without any house keys and is unable to get home. A number of angry text messages are sent from Calissa's phone to Granville. Despite a history of neglect and a general lack of care and consideration from Granville towards Calissa, she would defend Granville, saying that she believes he is not capable of this crime and has firmly supported him even after his arrest and conviction, maintaining their relationship throughout his incarceration. Prior to the trial, Granville encouraged Calissa to not attend the trial, and Calissa was served a subpoena to attend court. The animosity between the prosecutor and Calissa can be felt a number of times throughout her testimony.
And Miss Kelly, you are still in a relationship with this defendant, aren't you?
I am still his friend, yeah.
You know that what he's charged with, correct?
Correct.
Capital murder of a little girl and raping her. And for the last 5 years, you've remained his girlfriend, right? Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And in fact, you have visited him at the Hillsborough County Jail over 366 times.
Have I?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
Isn't
I
that
didn't
true?
know that. I don't know the numbers, but I've been there a lot.
And you have talked to him on the phone over 2,000 times over the last 5 years. Isn't that right?
Wow. I wasn't didn't
Isn't that
know.
correct?
I can't say that's correct. All I can say is I do speak to him on the phone. I don't know the many of times that I've spoken to him on the phone, but you are correct. We do still speak on the phone.
We have one moment, Your Honor. And I think when you came to meet with me, and I was remiss not asking this earlier, you had told me that you had provided money to the defendant, correct, while he's been in jail?
For canteen?
For canteen, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so he can buy food, snacks, things like that, correct?
Correct.
For the last 5 years.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, how much total do you think that is? That
You don't know?
You tell me.
I can't tell you. I didn't tell you the numbers of visit and the number.
Is it over
of phone calls.
$1,000?
It is it? I don't know, sir.
Is
I
it
didn't
over?
keep it
Is
up.
it over $5,000?
I don't know. I just know I did it from my heart. I don't know how much it was. I just did it from my heart. I wasn't counting.
Right. Okay. So you get dragged into an investigation that you don't know anything about after the defendant takes your car and leaves you stranded. You're questioned by detectives. They seize your Lexus that you haven't gotten back to this day, and you still are in love with this defendant to the point where you go see him at the jail all the time and you call him, or you talk to him all the time when he calls you, right? Is that right, ma'am?
No, you're wrong. You're wrong about some of the things you just said. You're wrong about me being in love with him. So, no, that's not the reason. The reason is because I want to know as well some things, and the reason is we are friends. So that's what friends do.
In fact, when you came to talk to me at the state attorney's office 4 weeks ago, who were you with when you walked up to the 3rd floor to my office? Who was with you? Who traveled with you that day?
Gloria?
Gloria Gibson.
Correct.
This defendant's mother.
Correct.
Ma'am, you are in a relationship with him, you love him, to the point where you travel places with his mother, correct?
Not often. What does that have to do with anything?
The fact that you're in love with him?
No, the fact that you keep saying that I am. Did
Ma'am,
I ever tell you that?
It has everything to do with your testimony.
One at a time.
When you asked me that, I told you no, right?
Ms. Kelly, don't you think these jurors are entitled to know the nature of your relationship to this defendant, since you're testifying in a case where he's charged?
Not really.
The truth about that?
The truth is that I'm not in love with him. That's what you asked me previously, and I told you no. So you're saying that to put emphasis on the relationship that we already had for 5 years.
And it goes back before the 5 years,
It
right?
does.
For maybe 2 years.
Probably.
So 7 years you've been in a relationship with him.
7 years, yeah.
Okay. Are you prepared to tell us now what you did with your loan money?
I don't have to tell you that.
You don't want us to know about that?
Will that help you with this little girl case?
Is there some reason you don't want to tell us?
If it's going to help you, I will tell you. So is it going to help you with this case or not?
Are you going to tell us or not?
I don't think it's going to help you. So that'll be a
You
no.
don't want to tell us, do you?
I don't think you need to know. It's irrelevant.
You don't want this jury to know, do you? I have nothing else, Your Honor.
All right, cross.
Having left his girlfriend stranded and using her car, he would drive back to Tampa and pick up Ebony from work. Then the two would drive to Felicia's house.
So what happened when the defendant comes to pick you up?
He came and picked me up. I got in the car, and we rode around there, and I knocked on the door, and I told Sugar Plum, come on, we're fit to go
When you say we rode around there, what do you mean?
to Sugar Plum house.
And was Felicia there?
Yes, she was there.
So did Felicia go and get in the silver Lexus?
Yes, she did.
And did you go get in the silver Lexus?
Yes, I did.
And who was driving?
Granville,
And where were you sitting?
in the front seat,
And where was Felicia sitting?
in the back seat.
When you left Felicia's house, where did you think that you were going to go to?
McDonald's.
Did the defendant drive you to McDonald's?
No, he did not.
Where did you go?
He was riding towards his house, and I'm looking like, I believe he done, I'm not sure that he said that's where he was going, but I know that was not the plan. And when I seen that we was going towards his house, I'm saying in my head, I'm like, she hungry, you know what I'm saying? And he like, oh, he said out of the blue, oh, my mom cook, and I'm looking like, she's not for to eat your mama food.
Granville would not take the two to McDonald's as he had promised, but instead drove them in the opposite direction to his mother's apartment in Temple Terrace. On the way to the apartment, Granville stopped at a Checkers restaurant and bought Felicia some food. He then offered Ebony some MDMA.
So we got close to almost the destination, which is over in Temple Terrace, which is his house. He showed me while I was in the car. He wiggled the bag, and I'm like, oh, shoot, he got drugs. And I know I went Sugar Plum, and I'm like, oh, my God. So by the time we parked, he gave it to me, and it was in my hand.
So was that already after you had gone to Checkers?
Right.
Okay.
As soon as we got to the apartments, when I noticed that that's where he was going, I'm like, I said, Sugar Plum, call your mother and let her know that you with me. And I dialed her number, and she let her mother know that she was with me.
Whose number did you dial?
Her mother number.
And what is her mother's name?
Felicia.
Felicia Demerson?
Yes, ma'am.
Did the three of you go upstairs?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, was his apartment upstairs?
Yes.
On the second floor?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what happens when you all go into the apartment?
I know I took the Molly.
I'm sorry?
Took the Molly, the drug that he gave me. We went upstairs. She sat down. She was already proceeding eating in the car, and she finished eating while she was up when we got upstairs.
Did you remain at the apartment with Felicia and the defendant?
When?
After you got there after checkers?
Yeah, I did.
How long were you there for?
We probably was there for I was there for 10, 15 minutes. That's when he called. He went in the kitchen, and he told me to come here. And as soon as I got up, that's when I felt under the influence. And he was
And when you say you felt under the influence,
I felt the Molly kicking in. I felt high. I started feeling high. So that's when he was like, I went in the kitchen, and he was like, do you know a way to get some weed from him? I was like, yeah. So I called my granddaddy and asked him, do he know who had some weed? And he was like, yeah, I know who got some weed, which is Windermere. And he's like, come to my house and he'll be over there.
did you go over to your grandfather's house?
Yes, I did.
Did all three of you go to your grandfather's house?
No, ma'am.
So where did Felicia go when you went to your grandfather's house?
So when I confirmed with him that, my granddaddy got some weed over there, I asked, I told Felicia to come on, which is Sugar Plum. I told her to come on, and he was like, no, you don't have no license, and you finna go and get some weed so I could watch her. And I asked Sugar Plum, and she was okay, and she said, yeah. And I said, I'll be right back.
So it was the defendant's decision for you to keep her there so that she wouldn't be in a car with you who didn't have a license or
Yes, ma'am.
who had marijuana.
Yes, ma'am.
Were you concerned at all about leaving her with somebody that she had never met before?
No, I wasn't concerned. I was and I wasn't concerned. Because how he made me feel comfortable on the first night I met him, and how he made me feel when we went going to pick up Sugar Plum. So it was like he had that concern of like a father figure. Like, that's how I felt.
So how is it that you got to your grandfather's house?
He told me to drive his car.
Meaning the silver Lexus?
Yes.
Ebony leaves the apartment with the young girl in the care of Granville Ritchie. It takes her about 20 minutes to drive to her grandfather's house to collect the weed, and is gone for a total of around 50 minutes. When Ebony returns to the apartment complex, she calls Granville, who tells her that Felicia has gone to the local CVS as she wanted candy. He says that he did not want to go for a walk with her, so he gave her some money and sent her to the store alone. Ebony tries the gate code to the apartment complex that Granville provided her, but it was incorrect, and he is now no longer answering his phone calls. Unsure what to do, she goes to the CVS to look for Felicia. At the store, Felicia is nowhere to be found, so Ebony returns to the apartment complex once more.
I went straight back to the apartments.
Were you calling Granville or the defendant to let him know that Felicia was not at the apartment?
So halfway when I got almost there, he called me. And I was like, that's not the gate code. He was like, yes, it is. So when I got to the gate code, I typed it in again. And it was not the gate code. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting frustrated. So that's when I seen, it was a little boy who had approached me with a white karate suit on. And he was like, you trying to get in the gate? I was like, yes, can you come over here and type in the code? And he typed in the code and I came in.
Did you then drive back to the apartment?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you see the defendant back at the apartment?
Yes, I did.
And where did you see him at?
He was standing outside.
Outside where?
Of his door.
And he was upstairs standing outside of his door?
Yes, ma'am.
What did he look like?
He had no shirt on.
I'm sorry?
He ain't had no shirt on. He looked like he was sweating. Like he was just... And I looked up as I was driving. I'm like, damn, what is going on? So I pulled in the drive-through. I went at the parking lot, and I went upstairs. And he was telling me they ain't got to let her go to the store and she ain't come back yet.
Were you concerned that Felicia was not there and that you could not find her at the CVS?
Yes, I was very concerned.
So what happened next?
That's when that's when he calmed down, and I started thinking, I'm like, oh my God, just go ahead and left and go to the dang store.
I'm
And
sorry,
after-
what was that?
After he done calmed down, that's when I sat there and I thought about it. I'm like, dang, she done went to the store and he done let her go to the store. So that's when I was about to start panicking, like, why you let her go to the store? You know, she already ate, you know. And he was like, I don't know. She really wanted some candy. And I was like, I want to pray. And I was like, I need to get in the closet and pray.
So why did you need to go in the closet
Because
and pray?
I was getting ready to panic, knowing that I was high and I was trying to just calm down. And I went in the car. He said, you go in my mama's room in her closet and pray. And I just stand there, got on my knees and started praying.
How long did you stay in that closet? Do you remember?
Like, no longer than 2.5 minutes.
What was the next thing you then did?
Then I
Had
came-
Felicia returned during that time?
No, she did not.
So what did you do next?
So I came out, he was rolling a blunt, and I took a drink, and he proceeded sexual towards me, and we had sex.
And where is it that you had sex that time?
Right there in the front room floor. Right there in the front room floor.
Was that the room that has the couches in it?
The front room, yes.
Okay. At all, did you and the defendant ever go look for the victim out around the apartment?
No, we did not.
Why didn't you go look for the victim?
I was following his lead. He said, I'm finna drop you off home. I was like, oh, okay. And then I'm saying to myself, I'm like, well, dang, we ain't even going to look for the little girl. Like, I'm saying it to myself, but this his car, and I'm not going to say nothing out the way. So I was just like, I waited till he dropped me off, and then I called her sister and see where she was.
Was there a conversation about what you were going to do or what you were going to say about Felicia being missing?
Yes.
Ultimately, you were going to have to tell her family, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So what conversation took place with regards to that?
He told me to tell her parents that it wasn't no male in the house, and then he told me that he's telling his mom was in the house, a female in the house.
Okay, so why did that whole conversation happen, and why is he telling you to say that there's no male in the house?
To make me seem like I wasn't no bad person leaving her, and he told her to go to the store.
Was he telling you that you would be viewed as a bad person?
Yes, ma'am.
That if you had left Felicia there with a man, that you would be viewed as the bad person?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you point out to him that he was the one that in fact told you that you needed to leave her with him?
To who?
Did you tell the defendant that?
No.
Okay. So you're just going along with what he's saying?
Yes, ma'am.
So if you weren't going to be allowed to say that there was a man there at the house, what was the story going to be then?
That it was a woman there, and she left out the door. I took a shower and she left out the door. That was the lie that I told in the beginning.
Granville would concoct a story in which both Ebony and his mother, Gloria Gibson, became involved in. The story was that Ebony took Felicia to the apartment to visit Granville's mother. While she was there visiting, she took a shower, and this is when Felicia ran away as the door was left open. Ebony and Granville's mother, Gloria, agreed to stick by this story despite never having met each other. Granville then drives Ebony back to her home, and from here she would meet up with one of Felicia's sisters, whom in turn alerts her family that the young girl is missing. The family notifies police and a search for Felicia is commenced. The situation is only classed as a runaway child for a few hours and shortly escalates to a missing persons investigation. The search is extensive as flyers were handed out, door knocking and sniffer dogs were utilized, and Felicia Williams is looked for all across Temple Terrace. Ebony is questioned a number of times regarding the last time she saw Felicia, and the apartment is searched. The lie that Granville told his mother and Ebony to tell would continue to hold up as both women don't budge from the story. When Granville's mother was interviewed by police, she would play along so well as she would say that she recalls Felicia, the girl that she had never once met, was a mean young girl. A final police interview is conducted with Ebony, and this time she tells a different story. In this new story, she says that she was actually there to visit Granville, not his mother. She informs police that she was having sex with Granville in the other room, and when they finished, Felicia was nowhere to be found. After the interview, Ebony is arrested for providing false information in an investigation.
Why is it that you decided to change your story and then tell them that there was a man in fact there?
Because, I don't know, I just telling the truth. And then by the end of the night when they told me that she's dead, I was like, no, I really left her with this man. So if it's end up to being something, somebody need to say something.
But when you told them that it was there a man was there and you were in the shower and she walked away, that was not the truth, though, correct?
No, that was not the truth.
Did you stick with that story, or did you?
When they told me that she was dead, I told the truth.
When did you learn that Felicia was located?
Before they arrested me.
Let me finish my question, Ms.
Oh,
Wiley,
okay.
before you answer, okay? When you learned that Felicia had been found dead, where were you?
In the police station.
The same night of May 17th of 2014?
Right, that's it, yes.
And how is it that you learned that?
By the end of the night, they had put me in another room, and they sat me down, and it was like, now, you need to tell the truth. Where do you think she at? And I'm like, she probably somewhere in somebody's house. And they was
Did you honestly think that, or were you?
Yes, I honestly thought that.
How did you think she would be in somebody's house?
Because Sugar Plum is one friendly person. She was just freely to talk to anybody. She wasn't scared.
So you were told that she was found deceased, is that correct?
Yes.
And so what did you tell law enforcement then?
I told them that I lied. And they was like, what you lied about? I said I left her with Trevor, and he wanted me to go and get some weed for him. And then when I came back, she wasn't there.
Did you tell them that you had gone to the CVS looking for her?
I'm not sure. I told them all that. I don't even think they gave me a chance to tell them all that. They just arrested me. They said, you're arrested for giving false information.
And was this third story that you told them, was that then the truth of what happened?
Yes.
Everything that you have testified to here as to what you did on that day?
Yeah.
There's some paper towels right there, Miss Wiley.
The next day, which is May 17th at around noon, Maria Diaz has finished work at a laundromat and went to the beach to unwind with her friend.
De ahí estaba yo sentada ahí y el amistad mío se fue a sentar al lado mío y cuando me dijo que me levantara rápido porque hay algo ahí que estaba nadando en el agua.
So I went to sit down there. Then my friend came to sit down next to me, and he told me to get up quickly because there was something there in the water.
Okay. And did you see that thing in the water?
¿Y usted pudo ver eso que estaba en el agua?
Sí, estaba al lado mío.
Yes, it was next to me.
And what did it appear to be?
¿Y qué, lo que usted vio, qué le parecía a usted que era?
Lo miramos que era una persona porque se bajaba y su cabecita se bajaba y se veía que una cabecita así estaba bajando y estaba, no, subía y se bajaba.
We saw that it was a person because we saw the little head going up and down. The little head would go up and down.
Felicia's body had been in the water for around 17 hours and was now smashing against the jagged rocks. As police recovered her body from the water, they noticed that Felicia had sustained a large amount of injuries post-mortem from hitting the side of the rocks.
Can you give us a brief overview of the injuries that you opined or that you observed?
I think the most notable thing was the body had multiple superficial injuries. That is, they didn't really go deep in the body, and those are distributed primarily across the front of the face and the chest. There's some lesser injuries, but all of those were post-mortem artifact. That is, they happened after this girl was dead. There were other injuries that were external as well as internal that happened while she was alive. For example, she has some genital injuries. I believe those happened while she was alive. She had some injuries inside her throat that happened while she was alive. She had injuries to her shoulder that happened while she was alive. Injuries to her middle back that happened while she was alive.
Did you observe any injuries about her head?
Yes, there were several bleeds underneath her scalp. Again, those happened while she was alive. She also had some bleeding on the sides of her head that happened while she was alive. Those are associated with the strangulation injuries that I mentioned earlier.
For most of this section, the camera was pointed at the defendant, Granville Ritchie, due to the graphic nature of the photos being displayed.
Can you explain what specifically we're looking at here and whether or not any injury is documented on these photographs?
This is the right, as you're looking, it's as though you were looking at Felicia. Her right eye is on our left, her left eye is on our right. And there is a eyelid retractor that's been placed in to open her eyes so you can really see the whites of her eye as well. And you see the little blood vessels here. That's the arteries joining the veins. The capillaries are in there. And the little red dots, those are the particular pinpoint bleeds. What happens is, if you're struggling to breathe, you put pressure on the blood within the blood vessels inside, and the capillaries there rupture. So it's a little different process. It's a different mechanism, but the end result's the same thing. That is these pinpoint bleeds.
And these pinpoint bleeds, specifically in this epicardium and the thymus area, are caused by consistent with manual strangulation. Is that correct?
They are consistent but not diagnostic of. Again, this is a non-specific finding. This doesn't prove or disprove strangulation. It's a very common finding in strangulation.
As we go further, are there items or injuries that you saw that do in fact point directly to manual strangulation?
Yes, actually, if you go back to strangulation in general, because you can also see it with ligatures or ropes around the neck, belts, that kind of thing. The hemorrhages in the whites of the eyes. That is a finding that you see in strangulation, either manual or ligature. And then internally, we're going to see some more findings that are more indicative of manual strangulation. That is the hemorrhages in the neck that we've already touched on. The hemorrhages in the temporalis muscles. Those are different types of asphyxiation, strangulation predominantly, and that could be either a ligature or manual.
Over almost a 3-hour testimony, Dr. James Downs will describe in graphic detail, using photos of the deceased girl's body, every single injury she sustained both in life and after death. He meticulously outlines all of the injuries caused by the environment, and then details injuries to her neck, head, shoulders, legs, and vagina that could not have been caused by the environment.
Are pathologists typically able to say the death occurred at 5 p.m. on this date?
Only on TV.
Okay. Are your findings consistent with her death occurring at approximately 5 p.m., being placed into the water at approximately 11:30 p.m., and being found the next day at around 3 p.m.?
Yes.
Dr. Downs, do you have an opinion as to whether or not the victim in this case was alive or dead when she was placed in the water?
I don't have any indication that she was alive. I can't completely dismiss that. But based on everything that I see, I believe she was dead when she was placed in the water.
Are all of the inflicted pre-mortem or pre-death injuries consistent with having been occurred at or around the time of her death?
They are.
Do you have an opinion as to the amount of time it would take a person to inflict all of those injuries that we have been discussing all afternoon?
They could certainly happen within a matter of minutes. We discussed the strangulation to the point of unconsciousness, continuing that grip for another couple of minutes. Add to that a couple of blows to the head, the forceful gripping or whatever it is that caused the bruising to the shoulders, the bruising to the back. That could all have happened in the order of minutes. The genital it doesn't take long to have one thrust and you have that injury. So all told, it could have been, maybe 5 minutes. Could be longer than that.
Minutes as a minimum. 5 minutes as a minimum.
And again, don't hold me to the 5 minutes. If you said 4 minutes, 30 seconds, I'd say sure, why not? But a ballpark, that's an estimate.
Are your findings consistent with a 9-year-old being attacked, raped, strangled?
Again, you used a term that I don't use. Forced sexual penetration, yes, and would be consistent with this manual strangulation as well, and attack.
Within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, what is the cause of death of Felicia Williams?
Asked and answered.
Sustain the objection.
Within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, what is the manner of death for Felicia
Asked and
Williams?
answered.
Well, actually, I don't know if it's been asked within a reasonable degree of medical certainty. So go ahead, you can answer.
Manner of death is homicide.
No further questions, Judge.
Just before the discovery of Felicia's body, Granville Ritchie was picked up by police as a possible suspect in the disappearance of the girl and interviewed. Throughout this interview, he maintained the same story as Ebony, that they were having sex and then the girl vanished. He tells police that on the night of May 16th, he drove around for a while looking for Felicia and then drove east to visit a friend. Phone tower data shows that he in fact drove west, not east, west towards the causeway near where Felicia's body was found. The phone records also show that during this time, he was on the phone with someone. This someone happened to be another woman whose name is Ivy Van, a woman from Mississippi and whom was also in love with Granville. She had been in a relationship with him for around a year prior to these events, as they had met when he was repairing cellular towers in her area. The two would stay in regular contact via phone and text, and Ivy was unaware that he was in a relationship with Calissa. She would send Granville money frequently, which is shown via bank records and text messages. On the night of May 16th, around 11 p.m., approximately the time that Felicia was placed in the water, Granville calls his long-distance girlfriend and they talk on the phone for a bit.
So that day when he called me, he said, "Baby, I'm listening to you and I'm ready to go back to work. I want us to move out of the state and, start a family, start a get a better relationship and start a family." And I said, "Oh, what happened? I'm happy, I was happy."
And so on that day when he called you at 11:11 p.m., did he sound upset or stressed in any way?
No.
Did he sound the way he normally did on all the other times you had spoken to him?
Yeah, he sounded, it was different because he normally don't talk to me like the way he was talking, being nice on the phone, so I'm surprised.
Do you mean talking about your future and moving forward in your relationship?
Right, because he never said nothing like that, so I'm happy.
A mountain of evidence would pile up against Granville over the course of the trial, with many links connecting him to the location of where Felicia's body was both placed in the water and then found. Felicia Williams' body was found in the Courtney Campbell Causeway, and traffic cameras show that the silver Lexus was actually there when he said he was in a completely different location. A mangrove leaf was found in the headlamp of the Lexus that matches the same plants on the causeway where the body was found. Scratches on the side of the Lexus that match recently caused damage to the plants on the side of the road, and sand found in the passenger side of the vehicle that matches samples of the area. A 911 call was placed from Granville's phone that only lasted a few seconds at the time of Felicia's disappearance. The defense would argue that no DNA was found on the sex kit, and no other DNA than Felicia's was found on her body. The prosecution would argue this and say that condoms were found amongst Granville's possessions in the vehicle, and also noted that it is quite common in cases that deal with sexual assault to see blunt force injuries the same that Felicia had, with no traces of DNA if a condom is used. A broken wheel and a zip from a suitcase were found in Granville's mother's apartment, the same apartment that had scuff marks from a broken wheel dragged along the floor. The prosecution said that Granville had stuffed Felicia's 110-pound body into the suitcase and then dragged it across the apartment in a panic, breaking the wheel and the zip. He then loaded the suitcase into the trunk of his girlfriend's car, and later that night at 11 p.m. drove to the Courtney Campbell Causeway to place the body in the water. Cell phone tower data not only puts him close to the location of the causeway, but directly conflicts with Granville's story of where he says that he was at that very time that Felicia's body was being placed nude into the dark, cold waters. The jury would reach a verdict of guilty for first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and capital sexual battery. This was not the end of the trial, though, as the penalty phase would need to be conducted to decide whether Granville would face the death penalty or not. For the state of Florida to be able to pursue the imposition of the death penalty, the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt the existence of a number of aggravating factors that accompanied the crime. In this case, the state would argue that the aggravating factors present are as follows. The victim of the capital felony was a person less than 12 years of age. The capital felony was committed while the defendant was engaged in the commission of a sexual battery. And 3, the capital felony was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel. Here is a quote from court documents. In this case, the jury unanimously found that the state proved the aggravating factor of heinous, atrocious, or cruel beyond a reasonable doubt. Specifically, the court finds that the testimony of Dr. Upshaw Downs and Dr. Randall Alexander establishes that the child victim suffered numerous injuries to her head, neck, body, and genitalia during the course of sexual battery and homicide. Their testimonies established that the extensive injuries to the child victim's genitalia were indicative of forced sexual penetration. These injuries, when perpetrated against a 9-year-old girl, would be particularly painful as her body was not physiologically prepared to engage in sexual intercourse. Additionally, the testimony from Dr. Upshaw Downs regarding the extensive injuries to the child victim's neck, signs of internal injury and bleeding in the neck and head, hemorrhaging of the blood vessels of the eyes, and deep injuries to her tongue caused by forceful biting, all indicate that the victim was alive, conscious, and struggling for her life during the forced sexual assault and homicide. The expert testimony established that this process took several minutes at a minimum, allowing the victim to be fully aware of her impending death. Taken together, the facts in this case established that the child victim suffered a horrendous, physically painful, and psychologically torturous death at the hands of the defendant. End quote. Dr. Emily Lazarou would conduct an evaluation of Granville and his case, and here is a quote from court documents in regards to her findings that he suffers antisocial personality disorder. Quote, in support of her diagnosis, Dr. Lazarou emphasized the defendant's pattern of deceitfulness and manipulation of others for his own benefit or pleasure, his consistent irresponsibility with regard to his financial obligations, and his lack of remorse for having hurt or mistreated others, amongst other criteria, indicates a diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder. Dr. Lazarou supported her findings by pointing out the defendant's pattern of manipulating women in his life to financially support him, as well as the manipulation of Ebony Wiley prior to the offense in order to get the child victim in this case alone with him. The actions preceding the sexual assault and murder of the child were carefully thought out and executed in an effort to avoid detection and responsibility for the offense. She explained that these are not behaviors of someone who is incapable of controlling their actions due to mental defect, but were instead the result of careful forethought and planning. End quote. A number of mitigating factors were presented by the defense and considered by the jury, such as the defendant's claim, backed up by video testimonies of people in his family and village of origin, that he was raised in a poverty-stricken area of Jamaica and that his father was violent and abusive towards him. He says that he suffered years of emotional and physical abuse, including severe head injuries that caused brain damage, at the hands of his father, who was also frequently not home, leaving the defendant, the oldest of 18 siblings, to care and raise them all. Ultimately, the jury would conclude that the mitigating factors were not enough, and Granville Ritchie was sentenced to death. His punishment was deemed just, but it will still never be enough of a price to pay for the life that he took from Felecia Williams.
On December 9th, 2004, at 1:56 p.m., God blessed me with an 8-pound, 1-ounce healthy baby girl who I had the honor of naming Felicia Nicole Williams. But to others, she was known as Sugar Plum. I knew when she was first born that she would be my special child. And that's because she had that drive and will and was always determined to make things happen. I can remember back in June of 2013 When I had my foot surgery, she stayed in the house the whole entire summer, nursing me back to health. And not only did she do that, she also cooked for me, bathed me, and Sugar Plum also, at the time of my surgery, made sure my baby, who was 2 years old at the time, was well cared for. Even though Felicia was 9 years old, she was very smart, advanced, and very wise beyond her years. Like an elderly person would say, she was an old soul. Felicia loved riding her 3 bikes that she got for Christmas that following year. She liked going to the park and enjoying going to the pond and feeding the ducks. She was a cheerleader. She sang faithfully in the youth choir at the New Zion Holiness Church, where I am a faithful member. She was active with the International Free and Accepted Modern Masons and Order of the Eastern Stars Blue Valley Youth Court, number 203, which has now been renamed in her honor as Blue Valley Felecia Williams Youth Court, number 203. In our church, they honor her by setting a seat aside with a black bow in remembrance of her for 30 days. I could remember the last conversation I had with Sugar Plum on May 16, 2014 at 4 p.m., and she never departed from her mommy without telling me that she loved me. Sugar Plum didn't only touch lives through death, she also touched lives through living. Sugar Plum had her first job at a local barbershop, sweeping the floor and taking the trash out. She never met a stranger. She came home at times after riding her bicycle bearing gifts from where she helped a neighbor or elderly person take out their trash, feeding their dogs, or just sitting on their porch and keeping them company. But you truly will never understand what a unique individual you took from us. Not only was she a daughter, she was a granddaughter to 4 sets of grandparents, a goddaughter, a niece, whom one of her aunts gave the honor of being nicknamed Sugar Plum. And she was an awesome aunt herself to her 2 nieces at the time of her demise. She was a sister to her 6 siblings who miss her tremendously and her every day. Felicia's death has affected my life and took its toll on my entire family. Even though it's been 5 years, it feels like 5 days ago. I have not yet returned to work.